Good morning.
Good morning.
So they say Bruchot Habaot, right? Because all ladies here. Although somebody told me that actually there's some men who are watching it online, but so even though we say it's for women, there are some. I think there are some men who are taking a look too.
We won't tell.
You won't tell. So tell me, was who's the teacher? Anybody? No teachers here? Okay. So you know that when you teach a subject and you review and you have a quiz, that helps, right? Right. So today we're going to have a little bit of a Hidon. Hidon is a quiz. It's not going to be in writing. You're not going to get graded on it, but just a little bit of a review. So to reinforce some of the items that we learned and to help us to remember them. So first of all, we're talking about Talmud, which is Gemara, Mishnah, and Gemara. About when was the Mishnah written? Anybody remember? Thank you, Eva. So
50 BC to 200 CE.
Okay, so that's about the time of the Mishnah, and it was written in Israel mostly, and it was written in Hebrew. How about the Gemara? When was the Gemara? When does that come from?
After 500?
Up to about, right, like 200 to 500, right. And so, how about the first printing? That's a little tougher one, because originally it was all manuscript. The first time was printed where? In Venice, right? Yeah, in about the 1500s. What is a halachic hour? Anybody remember what that is? What is? How do we figure? Jill?
Oh, it's 1/12 of the time between sunrise and sunset.
Well, both actually. Halachic hour is overnight or during the day, right? So a halachic hour, how we calculate our times for doing certain mitzvos depend upon the clock, but we don't depend upon that clock on the wall. We use the clock that Hashem gave us. So in the wintertime, the hours are less than 60 minutes. In the summertime, they're longer. Because as Jill said, we take the total amount of time between sunrise and sunset and divide it by 12. That's how many minutes we get in and out. That's a halachic hour. So then we have a concept of davening mincha. We daven mincha, the afternoon prayer. And there are different times that can be done, right? It's afternoon. But so there's a concept of mincha katana and mincha gedola, right? Tova is showing me with her hand signals. So Tova, do you remember what the times are for?
6 hours?
Is you start with a halachic hour, whatever it is, and then you're allowing 5.5 or 6 hours until the actually finishing to the allowable time.
No, 9.5 hours.
Right.
9.5 is the
And
time.
Kana is 2 hours.
9.5.
9.5 is
So you have the idea. So mincha katana, the small mincha, means the small amount of time that you have to do it, right? You have a shorter length of time. Mincha katana begins 9.5 hours after the start of the day, halachic day, and mincha gedola, to use Tova's hand signals, mincha gedola, larger amount of time, starts at 6.5 hours into the day. Okay? Why do we care? And when we're talking about Pesach, and we're talking about the Erev Pesach, and when we're permitted to, how late we're allowed to eat during the day, this concept of mincha katana and mincha gedola comes into play. And because the Gemara says that we're permitted to eat on the Seder night, samuch lemincha, near to the time of mincha. So then we have to know which mincha we're talking about, right? And we have to know how to define whichever one we're talking about. That's why it's important for us to know that there is a mincha gedola and mincha katana. And the mincha that the Mishnah is talking about is mincha katana, the small one, and samuch means near, means not exactly. So mincha katana starts at 9.5 hours, right? So we can go up to 9 hours. So up to 9 hours in the day, on the Seder night, we're permitted to eat. Of course, you can eat if you're hungry and so on. But the bottom line is you want to. Why are we concerned? Why does that matter?
So you enjoy the meal.
We want to enjoy the meal, right? We want to come into the Seder meal with an appetite, right? So that takes care of that.
And what exactly is plag mincha?
Plag mincha, very good. Plag mincha, plag means division or half or separation.
Okay.
And what that means is that we take the mincha katana,
Uh-huh.
this 2.5 hour period, split it in half. That gives
Okay.
us plag mincha. So plag mincha is 1.25 hours before sunset.
Okay.
Okay, so we took 2.5 and divided it in half. That's plag mincha. So what happens now? It's Friday afternoon, and we're having a meal together, and we lose track of time, right? And all of a sudden we take a look, and wow, it's Shabbos already, and we have this table set with we're eating our meal, and it's time to make Shabbos, time to make Kiddush, time to have the Shabbos meal. What do we do? Does anybody remember?
Cover the table.
We cover the table, right, and they, of course, their system of, their dining rooms were set up differently than ours. Each person, obviously in a well-to-do home, each person had their own little table. They reclined on a divan of some type, and when they discovered that Shabbos had arrived, they covered everything on the table, and then they make the Kiddush and they start their Shabbos meal. Okay.
Question.
Sure.
If you lose track of time, you might have lost track of the time to light candles.
That's a very good point.
Conversation.
That's a very good point. And the example that we're given is a group of men who were sitting. They lost track of time. So we assume that their wives were home. They lit the candles already.
What's the latest you can light the candles?
So you can light the candles up until the time. So usually they say up until 18 minutes after the what? Right? You guys know that better than I do. And so, but the candle lighting you can't delay. I mean, once Shabbos is there, you can't light the candles. Whereas you can make Kiddush later, right? We know that. We don't all start our meal exactly when Shabbos starts. Most often we don't. So, how about now Kiddush?
But that's for Shabbos, not for Yom Tov.
That's for Shabbos, not for Yom Tov. Well, in terms of lighting the candles, so on Yom Tov you can light later because you can transfer a fire from one to another. You can do that on Yom Tov, right? And that's basically the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov. Shabbos and Yom Tov are observed the same, except for those types of work or operation that are what?
You can cook on Yom Tov.
Right. Ochel nefesh. Those activities which are required to prepare food, those things you can do on Yom Tov, which you can't do those on Shabbos. So now I went to shul Friday night, and I heard Kiddush being said, and now I come home. Do I make Kiddush again? How come? Why?
Well, some say you make Kiddush again, some say you just have to do it over wine. You just have to make a bracha over wine.
Well, that's not exactly. It's
Okay.
what it is. You make the Kiddush again. The question is has your obligation to say Kiddush been fulfilled by hearing the Kiddush in shul on Friday night? So there's like 3 different opinions. Some say not at all. Some say that the Kiddush you were fulfilled, but not the wine. So you still need to make the bracha on the wine. And some say you fulfilled the whole thing. So, but anyway, what we do is we do say Kiddush again at home, and we say it because we probably did not fulfill our own mitzvah, and even if we do believe we did fulfill our own mitzvah, then there are other people at home, right? Right, and we want to make sure that they've heard Kiddush also, so they can
But what
fulfill their
about if there
mitzvah.
isn't anybody else at home?
So then you have to say, well, I didn't really fulfill my mitzvah anyway.
Because he didn't drink the wine.
So even if I did, because there is a concept of Kiddush b'makom su'udah, right? You're supposed to make Kiddush where you're going to be having your meal, and so that's that whole question of why don't we make Kiddush in shul on Shabbos morning, because you're not going to have a meal, and so the rabbi, when he used to do it, he would eat 2 cookies, so whatever, so he'd have the quantity. But okay, so you guys have the idea. Okay, so now getting back moving ahead. Where we left off last time, I'm going to go back a few lines just so we keep the thought. So we're going to be in the Hebrew. We're on Daf Kuf Aleph, 101, and we will be Kuf Aleph in the Hebrew.
It's 218.
No, it's in English.
Right. In the Hebrew, it's Kuf Aleph, which is 101. If you're in the English, it's going to be 220.
218 to 20.
It's going to be on 220, and if you count down the fourth paragraph on the page. Okay? Everybody got it? And we're going to go back to Rabbi Yochanan, because he deals with the question that Marcia brought up, whether what have you accomplished by hearing the Kiddush in Shul.
This is from last week.
That's from last week, right? We did this last week,
We left at
but we're in the middle of a thought. What?
You left at Pasuk Dalet on page Kuf Aleph, which is 218 to 20.
No, we're on 220. We're on 220, Rita.
We did it Dalet. Dalet is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from the bottom.
No, let's do it again. We're on page 220 in the English, and we're on the fourth paragraph. Either fourth paragraph from the top or fourth paragraph from the bottom. It's the same paragraph.
So clever.
Okay, so I didn't design it that way, but it sounds pretty cute. Okay, so let's go. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Afidei Yayin Nam Yotzer. So Rabbi Yochanan said, not only is the mitzvah of Kiddush satisfied by having heard it in shul, even the mitzvah of the wine. And why is that? If where's Terry today? Where's Terry? Terry's not here today? Okay. Because Terry makes Havdalah for everybody, right? Or for a group of people. So Terry makes the Havdalah, and everybody answers, and you have fulfilled your mitzvah, because Shomea Ka'onet. So you hear it as if you did it yourself. So the same thing, he's saying that you even fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush. And he says, and then the Gemara continues, Azda Rav Yochanan l'tameh. So Rav Yochanan is consistent, and that's important, because when we quote various different rabbis in the Gemara, it's important to know that they're consistent, because if there's something that appears that where they're contradicting themselves, we need to investigate and find out why that is, and most often they remain consistent. So Rabbi Yochanan is consistent in his opinion, and because Amar Rabbi Chanan bar Abaye, Amar Rabbi Padas, so Rabbi Chanan, the son of Abaye, said the name of Rabbi Padas, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, quoting Rabbi Yochanan. And this is kind of a neat thing too, because when you get a chain like this, it's very important when you are saying something that was said by someone else, that you give credit to that person. And so this is a chain. So the original person who made this statement was Rabbi Yochanan, and then you have all the others who are quoting that they heard it second, third, fourth hand, but in the end they come back to Rabbi Yochanan, and he says, Echad shinu yayin, v'echad shini makom. So now if you're in the Hebrew, you're going to be changing your page, right? So we're talking about, you started drinking wine, and you're in one location in your house, for example, and you changed your location or you changed the type of wine that you've been drinking. What needs to occur at that point? Ein tzarich levarich. You don't need to make a new bracha. Okay? And we're going to get into this topic now of what happens if my meal is interrupted or I move from one location to another. Yes, Kate?
Sorry, this whole concept of Kiddush and being Yotze is only applicable at this point for Friday night. This is nothing to do with Shabbat lunch meal.
Right, the Shabbos lunch
It's totally
meal,
different.
if you remember what Rabbi Yasker said,
You don't have to, if you're not mechuyev to even make Kiddush.
he said, first of all, there's a question whether it's certainly not a Torah obligation, it's a rabbinic obligation. But then the question is, if I make the Kiddush in shul, and you hear and you answer, have you satisfied your mitzvah? And the answer is no. So the kiddush that's made in shul is basically ceremonial. It doesn't really accomplish, and just
Also,
to.
my question here is that this is only applicable about Friday night.
We're talking about Friday night. We're not talking about Shabbos morning. No. We're only talking about Friday night. And so then they are, yes.
I was just wondering, what about the person who actually makes kiddush and drinks wine and shul?
Okay, so the person who makes kiddush and drinks wine in shul, so you have there are a couple of issues. Number one is what is his intent when he's doing it, right? And so does he have in mind that he wants to be yotze the mitzvah from that kiddush? And the other one is there is a concept of kiddush b'makom suda, that you make kiddush where you'll be eating your meal, right?
So
And
you do it twice, and
pardon?
if you hear it in shul, then you should do it again at home.
If you hear it in shul, you're supposed to do it again at home. And even the one who's making the kiddush in shul should do it at home again. And what some people do, who maybe are not intending to make it again at home, they'll drink the whole cup of wine, because the quantity of wine that they drink could qualify as a meal. So then they have the kiddush and they have the suda. Rita?
What if here in shul and the rabbi makes kiddush, add a kiddush, and everybody could eat a cookie or eat a kachel or something right after he makes his kiddush? Are you yotze then?
We're about to find out, because very soon the sisterhood is going to be making a kiddush in our new auditorium, and the rabbi will make kiddush, and we'll all be able to eat. And most often we'll also have our own wine or grape juice to drink, so we'll hear his bracha, and we'll then drink our own wine, and then we'll be eating. Yeah.
So now we don't have to make kiddush when we get home?
Not necessarily. And again, it depends on, are we making this our meal, or is this a little bit of a snack or something? So all this stuff, it's a little bit complicated, but it pays to understand how it all works. Okay, so here we have the person. He made kiddush, and now he either changes the type of wine that he's drinking, or he moved the location where he is. Maybe he was. What?
Shinui makom is the location, not wine.
Well, there are two. It says here.
Because it says.
Echad shinui makom.
Shinui makom, and
Right.
tzarich levarech.
Okay. So if he changes location, so if you go back a line where it says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Echad shinui yayin, Echad shinui makom. Whether he changes wine or he changes location, ein tzarich levarech. Does not need to make a new bracha, says Rabbi Yochanan. Is that my phone? No, sounds like my phone. Okay, so he says. So Rabbi Yochanan says you do not need to make a new bracha. Meisvei. So a question is raised. Shinui makom tzarich levarich, shinui yayin ein tzarich levarich. So they're quoting now a braita, and if you remember, we said braitos were written at the same time as the Mishnah, but they didn't make it into the main book, but they're still more authoritative than the Gemara. And Rabbi Yochanan, if you remember, was an Amora. He was active like 3rd century. So he's in that Amoraic period, which means he cannot argue against the Braita or Mishnah. They're a level higher, more authoritative. So now the Gemara is bringing us this Braita and says, hang on, Rabbi Yochanan, we have already a more authoritative source than you saying what? He's saying Sarach Levarich, right? And he says, if I change my place, I need to make a new bracha. If I change the type of wine that I'm drinking, ain't Sarach Levarich. So the Gemara says, Tiyufta, Rabbi Yochanan, Tiyufta. And a Tiyufta means a refutation. It means that Rabbi Yochanan cannot stand and argue against the Tana. So his statement is refuted. Okay? Going on. Yosef Rav Idi bar Avin, Kamed Rav Chisda. So Rav Idi, the son of Avin, was sitting before Rav Chisda. They were sitting and they were studying together. Yosef Rav Chisda v'kamar b'shmei Rav Huna. Now Rav Chisda quoted Rav Huna, and he made a statement quoting Rav Huna. Okay, these are all Amoraim. They're a little bit later than Rav Yochanan, but they're all Amoraim. He says, Had Amrit Shinei Makam Tzarich Levarech. That which you said, that someone changes his location. Perfect example. We could start our meal right here in this room, and then we go down to the new auditorium and we continue. So we've changed our spot. We changed our location. So the Brisa says, or Rav Huna is saying, he needs to make a new bracha, right? That was, your meal has been interrupted, you have to make a new bracha. And we're going to get into the technicalities. He says, Lo shanu elami bias lebias, avol memakom lemakom lo. So that's if it's in one, when they say a house, it could be that they mean even a different room within the same house, but certainly not in the same room. But if it's in the same room, so this room was quite large, I could start my meal over here, and then I see that there's a table with friends who want me to come and sit over there, so I might pick up and go sit over there, but I'm in the same room, so I don't need to make a new bracha at that point, okay? So going on, he said that's from place to place, but not from place to place, but not in the same room. Amalei Rav Idi bar Avin. So Rav Idi bar Avin said, "Hachi tanina leba masnita, de Rav Hinik." They said the Gemara is very economical with words. They're not going to say something to us or put something printed in here that's not required, not necessary. They're not just here to repeat themselves. So here, Rav Huna, who is an Amora, he's telling us a bit of information that Rav Idi says, I knew that already. I heard, we just learned the Brisa a minute ago, refuting Rav Yochanan. Why is Rav Huna now telling us the same information? Why is he doing that? So he says, Amrile b'masnita debei hinik. We heard it that this masnisa, this Brisa that was learned in the yeshiva of Bar Hinik. He says, Kabasach, like him, right? Vela Rav Huna masnita kamash malon. So he's saying, did Rav Huna, had he heard this? Don't forget, everything was oral, right? And so the Mishnayos had been written down. The Braitos were collected in some fashion, but they weren't necessarily all written down. So Rav Huna might not have heard it. He might not have known that this statement had already been made. So he's telling us a conclusion that he arrived at by himself without having the benefit of having seen it. Luckily for him, he didn't contradict the Brisa, but he didn't. So he's saying that he's telling us something that he arrived at it, he discovered it, or he figured it out. But he says Rav Huna masnita lo shmila. He had not heard that this Brisa. So it's okay that he's going ahead and quoting it for us. Okay. So going on. Says Rav Huna masnita l'shmiele v'su, and furthermore, Yosef Rav Chisda v'kamar mishmei nafshe, and Rav Chisda made a statement, not quoting Rav Huna, who was his teacher. Rav Huna was Rav Chisda's Rebbe, so Rav Chisda is making a statement for himself. He says, "Hada amrit shinu makom tzarich levarech." That statement which we made, that if I change my location, I need to make a new bracha. When does that apply? He's lo amarn el b'dvarim she'ein tunim bracha lacharein b'makoma. Only for those types of items which do not need a bracha after them. What does that mean? What that means is that when we eat certain types of foods, we need to, let's start at the top. If we wash and we eat bread, we need to make a full birkas hamazon, or we have to bench, right? If we eat, let's say, we have Mindel put out nice cookies for everybody. So those cookies, the bracha before we make them mazonos, but then after we eat that, we're supposed to make an alamichya, right? So that's called bracha me'ein shalosh, and the alamichya is like an abridged version of birkat hamazon. If all we had was coffee this morning, or if like me, you could only drink water, because believe it or not, I'm wearing Invisalign today. Our kids all had them. Our grandkids had them. My wife had it. I'm doing it. So all I can drink is water, because otherwise it makes a mess. So but water, you make a shahakol before, and then you make a bar nefashot afterwards, which is not considered an important bracha. So those items which do not require a bracha after them, like water, like fruit, right? If I had an apple, for example, so I would make the Bari Pura 8s beforehand, but I wouldn't need to make the big brother, bracha. Whereas if I had one of the 7 species, right? Those 7 different types of grains, fruits that with which Eretz Yisrael was blessed. So those you make what's called ala michya, or if it's fruit, it's ala peiros. If you're drinking wine, it's ala gefen. But that's called a bracha chashuva, an important bracha. So those types of food are, so you have 3 different categories of types of meals you might have. You have the meal requiring the full birkat hamazon. That's if I ate bread with my meal. Those items for which I need to make an ala michya, bracha me'ein shalosh. That's anything made from those 7 species. And then the last one is those items that do not require a bracha chashuva, and that's fruit, water, that kind of thing. So now, how does this apply to our situation? So he says, this issue of moving from one location to another, that applies. He says, Lo amor and el b'dvarim she'ein tunim bracha lacharein b'makoman, that do not require this bracha in their location. So, and what does that mean? So we take a look in Rashi. So if you're using the English, you're gonna have to trust me. If you're using the Hebrew, it's Rashi over here. This is Rashi. He's always on the inner margin. So this is the inside of the page. So Rashi's over here, and he says Avol Devarim Hatunim Bracha Lachareim. So what's in the bold print in block letters, that's quoting from the Gemara, and then in what they call Rashi script, which is a different type of letter, and it's not bold, that's Rashi's commentary. He says, Avol Dvarim Hatunim Bracha Lachareim B'Makoma, in their location, their spot. What is that? Klomar, for example, Bracha Chashuva B'Fnei Atzman, that is the Bracha Chashuva, which is an ala michya or benching, either one. That's Bracha Chashuva, an important bracha. Kigon, for example, Shiva Saminim, the 7 species, the 7 types of food items that the Eretz Yisrael is blessed with them. However, Beirach Acharehen, since he did not, so I'm sitting over there, and I had a nice prune Danish, and I got up and I went to sit at another table, right? Because some of my friends were sitting at that table. I got up to sit there, and I didn't make a bracha afterwards when I got up. Okay, but I'm required to, because that's one of the items for which you need to make an ala michya, because it's from wheat, right? Wheat is one of those things. So since I didn't do that, since I didn't make the bracha, but I got up to go someplace else, so then what Rashi is saying, Rashi is explaining what the Gemara means, and without Rashi you would never understand the Gemara. He says, Al kaviyas harishon holach, I went with in mind that I was koveya seuda, I established my meal over there. I started my meal there. Okay, and when I'm walking over there, I'm intending to come back. That's where my meal began, and that's where my meal is going to end. So he says, Al kaviyas harishon halach levarach achareihem bracha achas al shteihem, because I'm going to make the bracha from what I ate there, what over here, back in that location, right? So it's v'lifnei nami ein tzarach lachazor levarach, and therefore when I go over there, I don't have to make a new bracha, because I'm intending to come back to my original spot. That's where. So, but if what I had to eat or to drink was one of these items that you do not require the bracha chashuva. So, for example, if I had a Coke or something like that, and I got up, now when I go to another location, I do make a new bracha, because by getting up, and I'm not required to make this bracha chashuva, so it indicates that I'm finished with that meal, because I'm not required to make that bracha. I didn't make it, and the Gemara is going to tell us that. So he says, and so the Gemara asks, Ein tzarich levarach, my taima, why does he not need to make that new bracha? What's the reason? Lekviya kama hadar, because I'm intending to return. Hadar means to return to that place where I started. Rav Shesha Samar, Rav Shesha says, Echad zeh v'echad zeh tzarich levarach. So So Rav Sheshes disagrees. He says now you do need to make a new bracha. So you have a difference of opinion over here. Meisvei. So a question is raised. B'nei chabura shehayu mesubin lishtos. So a group of people are sitting together and they're drinking. So assuming that they're drinking wine, let's say. V'akru ragleim, let's say, likras chasan or likras kala, right? So they get up from where they were sitting and eating or drinking together to greet the bride or groom. So you can imagine maybe they're sitting around the chasan's tish, right? And they're, by the way, a lot of drinking does go on at the chasan's tish if you've never seen it. So they're drinking, and now the chasan, they hear the music start. The chasan's coming in. They leave that room to go to another room, okay? And kishehen yotzin ein tu'unin bracha lemafreya. They do not need to make a bracha acharona, the bracha on the wine, the bracha chashuva, the important bracha, the bracha ala gefen, because it was wine. They don't have to make it there at the end. And kishein chosrin ein tu'unin bracha lechatchila. And when they come back, they don't need to make another bracha again. They can continue their meal when that original spot, right? Kidam Rina, as we said, so Bamed Devar Mamurim. This is if you have the Hebrew, there is a George, how you doing? So if you have the Hebrew, there is an abbreviation here. I don't know if you can see this. It's right about in the middle of the page. That's where I'm up to. It says Beis Daled Aleph, means Bamed Devarim Amurim. What are we talking about? What are these words that we're talking about? So he says, Bamed Devarim Amurim, Shehinichu Sham Zakein Ochole. So there was a group of people, and among them there was an older individual. Esther, you can take that. That's a gift. Okay. And so they left someone behind. They left, the group left, but they left somebody behind. So when they leave someone behind, that indicates what?
They're coming back.
They're coming back. Exactly right. So is shanichu sham zaken ochole? They left somebody behind, and therefore they're not required, according to Rav Sheshes. Now he's a little stricter. You don't need to make the bracha when you leave. You don't need to make a new bracha when you come back. Avalohi nichu sham lo zaken v'lo chole. However, if they did not leave behind an older person or someone who's not well, in that case, kishen yotzin tunin bracha lemafreya. Now, when they leave, there's no indication that they're coming back, so they need to make that bracha acharona, that bracha me'ein shalosh, that ala gefen, whatever. Kishen chosrin, and when they come back, tunin bracha lechatchila, they need to make a new bracha, according to Rav Sheshes. Okay. So midikatani, where we learned akru raglehen, where it says that they uprooted their feet. In other words, they got up. What does that mean? Miklal dibidvarim hatuunim bracha lacharein b'makomon askina. We're talking about those types of items which require, when they say bracha, that's like shorthand for saying bracha chashuva, that important bracha, whether it's birkas hamazon or al michya. So we're talking about a situation where these are items that do require that bracha, right? And the reason that they do not need to make this bracha at that point is because they've left somebody behind, right? So therefore, when they leave, they do not need to make this ending bracha. And when they return, they don't need to make the bracha before the next course that they're eating. However, when they did not leave behind someone who was ill or someone who was old, when they leave, they have to make the bracha before they go, lemafreya, at the end of their meal, basically. Now they come back, then they make a new bracha. So kasha Rav Chisda, right? Because Rav Chisda said that they don't need to make the bracha, right? If I'm leaving my spot, but I'm intending to come back or whatever, I don't need to make a bracha when I leave. Rav Sheshes says you do, right? You got that? right? Because in the beginning we talked about Rav Chisda, and he's saying that if I leave, I don't need to make the bracha, and I don't need to make the new bracha when I come back. And here we have Rav Sheshes says he disagrees. So the Gemara says the kasha to Rav Chisda. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says. He continues. And by the way, if anybody wants these posters, I have a few from that we've already used. If you want them, I have them. If not, they'll go into Seamus. But so he says Montana Akiros. What is it talking about? This uprooting your feet. That's Rav Yehuda. The Sanya we learned in a Mishnah actually. This is quoting Rav Yehuda. Chaverim shoyim mesubim, a group of friends who are sitting together having their meal. Okay, and so what page are we on? You with me?
Page Kufet.
We're in Kuf Beis if you're in the Hebrew, and if you're what page? 222 in the English. Okay, so 222 in the English, and it will say, what's it going to say? Yeah, right at the right at the top of 222. Okay. So he says that the case that we're talking about is a group of friends who are sitting together. Okay, very nice. They're eating their meal and it's time to daven, right? So they get up to go to shul or to go to a class or to go to learn. Kishen yotzin, when they do leave this place where they've been eating, ein tunin bracha lemafrei. They do not need to make a bracha at the end, right? Because apparently they're intending to come back. V'cheshein chozrin ein tunin bracha lachatchila. And they don't need to make a new bracha. So let's say they left to daven mincha, which is very quick, or mariv, and they just had in mind we'll get up, we'll daven, and we'll come back, right? Amar Rabbi Yehuda says now, and Rabbi Yehuda is giving his clarification here. Bamed devar mamur, what are we talking about? Because bisman shehinichu sham mixas chaverim, that they left there some of the group, some of the friends that remained. Okay, and that indicates that they're intending to come back, right? However, if this group of people who were eating together went to daven mincha, let's say, and did not leave anyone behind, kishen yotzin, when they leave, to unin bracha lemafreya, they are required to make that ending bracha. V'cheshen chozrin, and when they return to unin bracha lechatchila, they need to make the opening bracha. Okay. Ela taima, what's the reason? Those items, those types of foods which require this bracha chashuva, right? Whether it's birkas hamazon or the alamichya, in the place where you ate them, the kishehin yotzin, when they go out, ein tunin bracha lemafreya. You don't need to make the bracha afterwards, right? It's a little bit confusing, but we'll get to it. V'chashen chozren, and when they return, ein tunin bracha lechatchila, they do not require this. So this is the case, even when they left someone behind, it's talking about a situation of those foods which require the bracha. So it's not going to be water or an apple or a Coca-Cola, right? But those items which do not require this bracha chashuva. So again, if people if they had a Coke or they had an apple or whatever it is, and now they got up, okay, they're not required to make this a big bracha afterwards. Therefore, when they come back, right, afilu l'rabbanan kishen yotzin tunin bracha lemafreya, and in that case they do need to make this little bracha v'kishen chozrin tunin bracha lechatchila. Because by getting up, they indicate that their meal is over and they're going to start a new meal.
Lemafreya is ahead of time, but you don't make a bracha ahead of time before you eat.
Well, I think lemafreya means retroactively, right?
What?
I think lemafreya means retroactive or the end.
No,
Lemafreya is ahead of time.
How does he translate lemafreya?
Mem fei reish ayin.
No, I know, but how does he translate it?
In the English.
What does the English say? Let's see. Let's see what he's saying. Okay, afterwards. Yeah, lemafreya means afterwards. He's saying afterward, right? That's the point. It's
No,
the,
the
it's,
mafreya is ahead of schedule.
okay, but
Ahead
they're,
of
but
time.
they're,
In other words, before you go,
translating this.
before you
they're
come back.
they're translating this as afterward.
Mafreya is in advance.
Maybe
Right.
at that time
So,
it was-
I don't know, I learned that Lemafreya, when I learned Ivrit, that Lemafreya was sort of retroactive.
Steinsaltz has it.
And what?
Steinsaltz says, introductory
Ahead of
lesson.
schedule, in other
That,
words.
that he says
Oh,
it's
no,
afterward,
no,
right?
Mafreya is,
It's
okay,
afterward.
yeah.
At that
Yeah.
time it had a different
We're-
meaning.
And we're in Aramaic too, don't forget. The Gemara is written in Aramaic, so sometimes a word that might have a
use it as
different
afterward.
So
translation.
maybe mafreya is after. not
That, after, that's the point.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is that if I'm eating that prune Danish, right, now I wanna go over and have a cup of coffee or something, so that Danish requires the bracha lemafreya, it requires that bracha afterwards. So if I get up and I didn't make that bracha, that indicates that I'm coming back. But if I have the apple and I don't make the bracha afterwards, or then it's I'm indicating that I'm finished with my meal because I'm not required to make that bracha. I got up, my meal is done, and now if I were to come back, I need to make a new bracha because I ended the chill.
Just tell me if this is correct. You're at a big super hall.
Right.
And you make a mazonos and you have a something, and then you walk over to another place in the same hall and you pick up another mazonos.
Right.
You don't have to keep repeating the bracha.
A lot of this too is what your intent is. Now, if I go to a wedding, for example, and there's the cocktail hour, and they're passing hors d'oeuvres and all that,
You're all over the place.
we're circulating around, right? But when I come into the dining hall for the meal and I sit down at my table, and now maybe I didn't wash before either because maybe I was just having mazonos. Now I'm sitting. That's a different
That's
story,
the table
right?
for the
So now if I get up and I want to have dessert at someone else's table, you know, these rules could be coming into play, right?
Did you have in mind, like, I used to go to the yeshiva in Fallsburg for a Purim,
Right?
and the places we were eating, they had in mind to go finish their meal or
Right.
have dessert,
Right.
either, Rosh Hashiva.
Right.
So they didn't bench after, they had in mind.
That they were going to do that. So a lot of this, a lot of what we're talking about is provided that the person did not set up in his mind what he was intending to do beforehand, right? So, because what's the issue? The issue is how do we interpret the actions that a person took?
By what we see.
By what we see, right? Yes.
So, the way the Gemara deals with demonstrating, what the intent was, is through people, the Zakein, the Chola, and the, Chaverim who are left there.
It's
Is
the
there the
situation.
possibility of saying, I left my coat here with the intent that I was gonna come back? In other words, an object.
What do you think?
To me, it demonstrates intent, but the Gemara doesn't seem.
Maybe they were in a hot climate. They didn't leave their coat behind. But I
Yeah,
mean,
it's possible that I've forgotten, but it's also possible to forget a kid or a sick person.
Yeah, friends of ours did that one time on the way to Grossinger's. They got halfway there and they said, "Where is Chaim?"
And they called it.
They left him home.
We're at the same wedding, and we have a couple of grapes, make a bracha on the grapes,
Right?
and, but you know that you're gonna stay for the meal and for the chuppah, so do you not make an al hamechia on the grapes? You've eaten the grapes, you've walked around, what do we do with the bracha, the al hamechia after?
Okay. So there's two parts to that question. First of all, what is the bracha on grapes?
Okay, so
Okay,
that's.
it's a good
yeah,
question.
And what is the bracha acharon on grapes? Because grapes,
Is the yayin part.
right, unless these grapes were specifically grown as table grapes and that was your intention, then you,
Okay.
just eating grapes is
let's
an
not do
alamechia.
grapes. Let's do, cake.
Cake,
Zonot.
okay,
You
okay,
take, the zonot and you have all intention of staying,
right.
and you're gonna continue the meal. You have to make a al hamechia on the zonot before you begin the meal, before the chuppah, let's say.
So you had your mizono in the cocktail hour, right? And now they have the chuppah, and now you're gonna go into the meal. So some people would make the bracha acharona because there's a span of time taking place in between, and some people would say I'm continuing my meal. But then the question is, did I wash before I at that point? I'm gonna be washing later, right? Right, so most likely, to my mind, you probably ought to,
Is there, if I go home and I take a drink,
right,
a juice, and I do shahako,
right?
is there a time, like when let's say I take another drink an hour later, do I have to say it again?
So that's a good question, and some people say it's like a 72-minute span between bites or whatever. That
Okay.
indicates your meal is over.
And what about if I'm in the kitchen with one, and then
Right.
I'm gonna be in the Florida room with the next drink? Do I have to do it again, or?
Was that your plan from the beginning? Did you intend to do that?
Oh, it's my home, so I
So-
consider all the rooms. And
Yeah. So
be a
then there you
huge
go.
apartment,
Or you,
my home.
yes, Jill, and we're just about out of Jill. Go ahead.
Oh, I was once studying with a bunch of women, we were studying brooklets, and
Right.
it said the amount of time had to do with how long you think that food would be out of your stomach. And it said something like, a couple of hours.
Right. There are all sorts, all kinds of, right, so
The
that's
juice
like,
is gone quickly.
right, just like, how long do we wait between meat and milk and all that, so. Okay, so, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
And we'll reconvene next Tuesday, 11:15.